At the end of our time in Ecuador, we had a 24-hour layover in Quito. We just had time to prepare for our trip to Bolivia, but we did decide to use this opportunity to put in some pictures that we took during our first time in Quito before we started making videos. So this is Old Town Quito, along the Street of the Seven Crosses. The reason it's named Seven Crosses is because you pass seven crosses standing out front of seven churches as you walk along this street. And we ended our tour of Old Town Quito in the plaza of the San Francisco Church. This church is built on the site of the Temple of the Sun that was here when the conquistadors arrived in 1532. You're looking at that plaza now. The very bottom layer of stonework on that church is original to the Incans. The rest is completely redone in a colonial style. We have spent the past 2 weeks getting high because we went from Quito, which is the second highest capital in the world, to La Paz, which is the highest capital in the world. Our trip to Bolivia involved a layover in Lima. The whole trip was pretty awful, so when we got to La Paz, we just laid low for a couple days, enjoyed relaxation and some local food. We kicked our travel back into gear by heading off to Copacabana to visit the Isla del Sol and Isla de la Luna, sites of Incan and pre-Incan archaeological stuff. We took a local bus, which involved a transfer across some water, where our bus there in green traveled separately from us. And then we enjoyed some local fish when we arrived into Copacabana. The following day, we started off onto Lake Titicaca, first visiting the Island of the Sun, where we immediately got onto a second boat that took us to the Island of the Moon. Lake Titicaca is significant in both Incan and pre-Incan mythology as the site from where the sun god Viracocha rose. Here on the Isla de la Luna is the Temple of the Moon and an asayhuasi, which is a site where women were trained in weaving, participating in religious ceremonies, and also trained to be wives to Inca nobles. Similar to the site that we saw in Cuenca, Ecuador, behind the museum. Once per year, a human sacrifice was offered to the Incan gods, and it is likely that the women were chosen from these training temples to serve as the sacrifices. As with all of these sites around Lake Titicaca, the origins of the building began with the Tiwanaku culture between 500 AD and 1000 AD. The Incans came in around 1400 AD and added or elaborated on the existing structures, including the really extensive terracing that you see all around the shores of Lake Titicaca. After exploring the Temple of the Moon on the Island of the Moon, we headed back to the Island of the Sun, where we started on the southernmost site of the Temple of the Sun. The lower level is the original construction, whereas the top part was reconstructed. This involved a lot of steps up, a fairly flat, about 1.5 kilometers hike, and then a lot of steps down. Going down, we were able to view the Incan Fountain of Youth. It unfortunately did not make us feel much younger, and also the Incan staircase along the highway. Here we did in fact drink quite a bit of the water. It was nice and cool and very refreshing to fill our water bottles from. This beautiful fountain led to this trickle of water down the side of the staircase. And at the bottom was a palisade that was constructed by the Tiwanaku cultures and was recently, I believe it was in 2014, was completely reconstructed to be what you can see in this picture right now. As we left the island of the sun for the day, the clouds had cleared enough that you could see the mountains in the background. After a day of rest, we returned to the island of the sun to visit the sites on the northern part of the island near a town called Chayapampa. After landing at this beautiful beach, we again hiked up a lot of stairs to see this labyrinth that was, again, originally built by the Tiwanakus and then added on to by the Incans. You can actually see the difference in the stonework of the Tiwanaku culture. And here on this very corner, the Incan stonework with the really fine fitted stones. Here's a view looking down over from the top of the ruins, so you can get a sense of how extensive the ruins are and how many steps we had to climb up to get to the ruins. From here, we headed along a path built by the Incans to the south of the island. And along this path, we were able to see on the left hand or eastern side of the island, the Sacred Rock, and along the west or right hand side of the path, the altar where sacrifices were made. So here's the path. Here's the altar. The Tiwanaku culture only offered animal sacrifices. Those were usually llamas. Starting with the Incans, they had human sacrifices. This is the Sacred Rock. The triangle is said to be the face of Viracocha. On the way back to Copacabana, the boat stopped at a floating island where some people had lunch. And we were able to take a look at one of these pontoon boats made out of the lake reeds. And this is what is said to have made up the bridge that the Incans used to get across Lake Titicaca during their era. Our last day in Copacabana, we hiked La Horca del Inca, which was an astrological observatory. You can see the stonework of the Incans in these rocks made into stairs. Got a great overview of the city after a very long hike. We then made our way back to La Paz again via a public bus. This time we had a couple different fellow passengers feeding the birds. So the birds actually followed the little boat that had passengers from one side of the lake to the other. On the far side of the lake, Stuart enjoyed a choripan, which is a combination of chorizo, meaning sausage, and pan, meaning bread. So it was basically a sausage on bread. Here again are our expenses for the week. You can see our expenses for the week hover right around $60 or $70 a day, not including international airfare.